What is the Great Lakes Future Project and what is it trying to achieve?
The Great Lakes Future Project is a project of about 22 universities on both sides of the border, engaging dozens and dozens of students, business, industry, government, non-government organizations collectively to understand what threats could drive the future of the Great Lakes, and then to imagine 4 possible futures, very positive ones to very negative ones. And once we imagine those futures, we are going to examine what sorts of programs, policies, collectively that might have happened to get us to any of those futures. The idea is to follow a path that gets us to a sustainable future.
How do you imagine the future?
Actually, in this process, in the Futures Project, there's actually a pretty rigorous method. It's not just creative, inspirational thinking, which is included, but what we did was we looked at these drivers of change, and we thought about how to characterize them across 2 different axes. So one axis turned out to be, after a workshop and a lot of consensus building, the capacity to make change or to govern in a responsive way to things that are threatening the Great Lakes.
Whose capacity?
Collective capacity. Good governance is government and communities and businesses, farmers, co-managing our collective capacity to make change and respond properly to threats as they emerge. The other axis characterizes the Great Lakes in balance, both a strong economy and a strong environment in balance, where the negative would be economy at all costs and the environment is terrible, or environment at all costs and everybody has to move out of the basin because we can't have any business or industry. So then we think about those 4 quadrants where we have a good balanced economy, excellent governance, excellent capacity to make change, and we talk about what that future is. And we imagine that as a sustainable, happy future. Or we talk about inability to react to climate change or to react to pressures, new chemicals, lack of attention to the economy environment balance, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and other things in between.
Okay, makes sense. So when you have those futures, how do you help individuals think about them?
What we're actually doing in June is having people look at those futures, and as a group of academics, government, non-government, citizens at large, we're going to collectively imagine what would have happened to get us to each one of those futures. Okay? And then once we've done that, we then sit back, and by the end of the project in September, we'll sit back and say, if the things that would get us to the future that we are looking for are not happening, what ought to happen? That's a message that we want to give back to government, but we also want to engage citizens to see if it makes sense with them, to see if there's something that we're missing, to see as users of the Great Lakes, as people who enjoy the Great Lakes, whether there's something they can do to contribute to getting to the proper pathway forward. So it's an engaged process. It's not just a bunch of academics making recommendations to government. It's everyone exploring it and discovering it together, so that it has some passion behind it and some rigor of analysis where many different stakeholders can understand the same things that are needed to make the Great Lakes sustainable.
Okay. You have a program going on June 11th and 12th. What's going to happen during that?
Well, we're going to actually reveal the scenarios. We've had students working with mentors from government and and academia. We're going to reveal the scenarios, and then we're going to go into breakout groups and actually do that path that I just described, where we're going to, in workshop settings, look at that potential future. Does it make sense? Is it plausible? And what would have had to have happened to get us there 50 years from now? What would have had to happen along the way? So that we then come back as a group and talk about different policy futures. And what we'll be doing after the June workshop, with that input from everybody at the workshop, is write up what we heard and take that out to the public for their consumption, for their feedback, for their engagement in the process.
And how are the different universities participating in this, the 20 different organizations?
Well, each of the universities that are part of this have put in some modest funding that helps us give stipends to the students and get the students to the workshops and the meetings. All of the universities have contributed a mentorship. In other words, we've got faculty that have volunteered their time, much like I have. And they're not getting paid for this just because they believe in the value of the project. So they'll be they sat down with the students as they wrote up the drivers of change, like climate change, like an economy or different energy futures. They participate in the workshops. They review the papers that the students have written. They mentor the students as they do the scenarios. And then they review those papers, and we hope to have those papers published in a format that many people can use, many people in the Great Lakes community in particular can use.
And how does government or government policy people, who and how do they get into this process?
We've invited them to the table from the very beginning. They were involved in our kickoff when we talked about the drivers. We had federal government on both sides of the border, state and provincial governments and municipal governments, all present in Ann Arbor when we talked about the drivers. Do they make sense? Are they well thought through? They're coming to McMaster next week in June because we want them to be part of the conversation when we talk about what possible policy pathways might we have taken to get there, and they are experts in this.
Sure.
We also had a meeting with them in March where we invited policy experts from all orders of government and a few from the non-government sector who were really sensitive to the policy-making regime here, to just tell us what they thought were the strengths of the policy directions in the Great Lakes and what they believed were the gaps, so that the students, when they write those scenarios, have something substantial to look at, to think about what could be possible into the future. So there's no way that I would ever get engaged in a process like this unless my colleagues within government, who are the policy makers, were engaged from the beginning and had a say, had their expertise inform what we come out with.
Okay, let's then think about how the Stop the Drop community, as members of the public, how do you see them getting specifically involved in this project?
One of the things we want to do with Stop the Drop is to go out to various communities around the Georgian Bay region and talk about what we found out in this process, which will culminate in September. We'll have our final understanding of what we think our policy recommendations should be. We would like to work with Stop the Drop so that we get feedback from citizens in the basin about whether what we're saying makes sense to them, whether it's understandable, whether it's accepted in terms of a necessary step forward in order to make change, so that they can then become advocates of that change and talk to their neighbors and talk to their family members and talk to other people in the basin to get involved and advocate for the kinds of changes that we need to make the Great Lakes more sustainable.
Suppose they couldn't understand. What do you do then?
We ask them why. We ask them to tell us what it is about our story that doesn't make sense or doesn't resonate with them, so that we can better communicate as a result of communicating with them. If they don't understand what we're doing, then we're not communicating it right. We need them to tell us how to communicate it properly.
That makes sense, okay. You're thinking then this would happen the September timeframe, or September, October? How are you thinking it physically taking place?
I think it would physically take place in the fall. Probably September, October, perhaps into November. It just depends on logistics, but certainly early enough into the fall so that travel doesn't become prohibitive, and that people are still, even though people who are part-time on Georgian Bay are still up there, because it's still a beautiful time of the year to be up there. So before the weather gets too cold, too prohibitive, that's when we hope to do this. And then we can take the stories and revise them as necessary to give them back to the people who are the policymakers who can use them.
Good, makes sense. Okay, so what we'll try and do, I think, is then let the community know during the summer what the structures are, what the opportunities are for them to get involved. Is that how you think?
Sure.
In terms of when we'd show up and how we want to sort of create groups in different places. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I think over the summer we should be getting the message out as to when we believe we'll be setting up these open houses or focus groups or whatever we may use. what we might be doing electronically, online, so that they're aware and they can be prepared. And then we will send out an agenda once we have figured out who's available in which communities at what time.
Good, great. Well, thank you. We look forward to working with you.
You're very welcome, Colin.
Bye-bye.